serving you a dose of wisdom and humor with a dash of radiance. Welcome to Biscuits and Sunshine with your hosts, Callie and Landra.
Hey y'all, we're excited to have you here for another serving of Biscuits and Sunshine. I'm Callie.
And I'm Landra. It makes me hella happy to have you here with us. We're recording this from Distant Sport Audio Studio in Athens, Greece. Welcome to episode 11, Indica. Bame. Let's go.
Today, we're talking about creativity and the lessons we've learned from it. And for me, creativity starts on the inside. So today, I want to start with a question for everyone. How are you doing? Really and truly, how are you? Our first answer to this question, and the real answer to this question, are usually, maybe, sometimes different. But I believe it's important to ask this question of ourselves and of our friends, especially as it relates to being creative and being in the moment. So, my dear friend, how are you today?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, we just had lunch. I feel like really full in my belly. But also I'm feeling just so achy in my shoulder. I have had this injury going on. I am at a place where I'm going to need surgery in a little bit. So yeah, just living in that constant kind of pain is a little annoying. So just feeling that. But otherwise, I kind of on the flip side of that, I'm just feeling so energized. And I think for a couple of reasons, I was able to, well, I started not just able, but started leading sessions in person with women here in Athens, embodiment sessions. So we do some movement, we do some journaling, some connection time. And so that is just feeling like very like, oh my gosh, it finally has happened. It's been a while. It's been a minute, because I took a pause intentionally. And I just feel so energized by doing the work, but also just so supported by the people that showed up. So yeah, it's making me really grateful.
Sometimes I think we experience seasons of gratefulness, and it's always peppered with moments of discomfort in various ways. And I think if you are one to live in the present moment and to embrace a range of emotion, the dichotomy of the two feelings sort of makes life even sweeter. It's like when you heal from an illness and you think, I'm so grateful to be well.
Yeah.
But we, maybe up to the point of getting sick, sort of took that for granted.
Absolutely. And the thing I will say too, like the big message I'm getting is I don't even know if it's just the season. It's also, I think this year is like really showing me like it's rest and heal. In the background, I shared in a previous episode, I lost my dad. He passed away in November. And so there's always that undertone, right, of grief. In this moment, the grief doesn't feel as acute or as hard, but it's there. Yeah.
The more I lean into this, actually asking the question of myself, like, how are you? The more I check in with myself naturally, the more I sort of feel alive, or the more I appreciate the passage of bad emotion, or the presence of something going really well in my life. Because when I answer things like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay, I know it's an indication to myself. When I hear myself give that answer, I know it's an indication that I need to go deeper and ask myself, well, why am I good today? Why am I just okay? Why am I fine? And maybe why do I feel the need to just say that? Why can't I be honest?
And it's interesting though, too. I was just going to say, it's about the company you're in. If you're just going to like a mundane store interaction, you're not going to unpack all of that with the cashier. But yeah, so I think, and also, I don't know if you find this too, it also kind of has to do with my mood.
Yes.
Have I worked through it? Is it like somebody said the other day and I was like, oh my God, that's so good. And I forget what context, but it's like, is it a scab or is it a scar? Because if it's still a scab, it's probably a wound too fresh, maybe if you haven't unpacked it and it hasn't healed. If it's a scar, right, that's the skin has toughened up over it. It's, it's probably from a place of like, you've digested it. What I've come to find is what you said about checking in with yourself, like that honestly is a mindfulness practice in itself. I think so often people think like mindfulness, attached to meditation, I got to sit a certain way or be a certain way and have all this time. When no, it's just woven into the everyday life. And so I do think to tending to the mind and the body is a lot like to tending the garden. You think about if there are certain things that, you ignore in the garden, the weeds start to grow more, right? The beautiful flower or food or crop that you planted is possibly starts dying. So, yeah, how are we tending to ourselves, our own internal garden? Are we watering? Are we weeding? Are we planting seeds? And so that's what I think about, right? All those things of nourishing ourselves and tending to ourselves that actually comes out in the how are we doing, literally.
100%. And that's a great way to bring us back to sort of the topic today, lessons from creativity. I really notice the value of mindfulness when I approach creative projects. I want to be in the right mood, the right headspace, the right state of being. I'm not good at forcing creativity. I think it visits you. I think ideas are meant to be born into the world and they will come to you when you're ready. If I can cultivate a garden within me that's good and honest as a relationship with myself, it helps me more nimbly tap into and capture moments of inspiration when they visit. That's a big lesson I've learned from creativity.
Okay, great. End of episode. Thanks everyone for being here today.
Wouldn't that be sad if it was it? No. But I think it is a good way to kind of get into the meat of what we're talking about. I think a good place to start too is how do we define creativity? For me, I think the world has a very narrow definition of what it means to be creative. They think of the arts, and that's pretty much exclusively it. But you see creativity in all things. I mean, the tech entrepreneur is creative because he's created an idea that didn't exist before. I remember having a friend who arranged cheese boards and created a whole Instagram page and a huge following out of doing that. Creativity lies within all of us. I don't believe it's a nature versus nurture. I think if you are creative, you are creative. And in my opinion, everyone is creative. It depends on how you set up your life and if the people around you view creativity in the same way and support you in that endeavor.
I like that so much. Yeah, I used to think exactly what you said. Creativity is like the fine arts. It's sculpture, it's painting, it's everything you see in a museum is like the way I would think about it. And I have to say, since marrying my husband, who is an absolute creative, it has really broadened my world. And I asked him, in just thinking about this topic, I'm like, how do you define creativity? And he said it's really the urge to make something. And I was like, right. And then the more I started talking as well, is that it comes from your own uniqueness. Like you said, like maybe there is like this, you're meant to do it. There's something deeper that you are really, really skilled at. But then there's a uniqueness in all of us. And so maybe some of us, it takes a little bit of time, some class, some, uncovering what it is that's unique. But then, yeah, exactly what you said about your friend in the cheese board. I immediately was thinking about a couple of friends, my friend Isa, who's an artist. And man, and she would talk about this too, like the way in which how she chooses her outfits and how she gets ready for the day, the different colors, the textures, the accessories she puts on. And that really influenced me too, where I'm like, wow, that's a really cool way to look at it. And then it's like, what I think that does is like the mundaneness of everyday life. It really can just bring this like lens of freshness. It can pull us out of that like, same old, what am I going to wear today? So I love that. Issa, shout out to you for that learning. And then I just think about it's like how we decorate our homes. You mentioned the tech entrepreneur. I started thinking of myself the more that I move in HR, more out of my traditional role and into being an entrepreneur. Like I'm absolutely creative in the way in which I put together my slide decks and how I choose to kind of arrange, the training materials that I do with managers, or being able to kind of draw on my own life experiences as I'm talking and coaching somebody on a one-on-one session. So yeah, when you said that, I was like, absolutely, there are ways to find creativity in everyday life.
I remember my mom telling me the story about how when she was little, she overheard my grandmother say, she's not creative. She's like me. She couldn't draw a stick figure. My grandfather was a big character. His life was colorful. He was very emotive. He was a painter, amongst a myriad of other things. Apparently, my grandmother didn't feel that way about herself. And in my mom overhearing this story, spent her whole life thinking that she wasn't creative. Like she couldn't draw, she couldn't paint. But I can tell you, every time she'd get on the phone with someone and she was just kind of talking and being present in the conversation, she'd always have a piece of paper and a pencil, and she would doodle the most intricate designs in the margins. And then when she retired, she started painting. And the paintings that she came up with, I mean, in the beginning of this venture, were more incredible than I think I could ever paint in my whole life.
Wow.
That's why I think creativity lives within us. When you talk about uniqueness, I think it's there. It just has to kind of be pulled out of us a little bit.
Cultivated.
It has to be cultivated.
We have to water it and we have to
Tend
let
to it.
sunlight and yes, all the good stuff. Oh my God, Sandra, way to go.
She's so amazing. So as you think about your relationship to creativity over your lifetime, it sounds like you haven't always identified as a creative.
True, correct. Yeah. I think, the world and people just put thoughts about creativity. I think all from a very loving place, wanting me to succeed in life. It was really, oh, you're so smart and business minded. And that's what really where the money is. And so more pragmatic. And I think it is that belief of like, well, starving artist. I always had access to dance and sports, but it was never like up front and center. It was more of like, oh, well, that's just something you have fun with doing. And I think now, looking back at my little self, if I would have continued to nurture that, I probably would have done a lot more something embodied. It probably would have been a dancer, a choreographer, something like that. And I found ways to kind of integrate that into my life. But really, no. And I think, just over time, the influences, I've talked often about the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Love that. And she does talk about that we are all creative. And also something she said that really resonates too, because often I could be like, oh, somebody's already said that, or I've already seen that being done. But she really punctuates, but it hasn't been done by you. And, yes, the world really, like, there's a lot of recycled ideas and thoughts, but it still needs to come through you. It's okay, right? And so that was kind of a big, like, aha. And at the same time, there is still, I think, in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and it might be even broader than that, a company called Brit& Co. And they do a lot for like women, different creative endeavors and other things to enrich your life. And they had this really like poignant video. It had all these little girls and they would ask them, they were videoing them and they were asking them questions like, why don't you do this? And they would just act out and they would do all these really beautiful, like cute, rambunctious things. And then women that were like in their 30s and above would just like clam up and be like, I'm sorry, wait, okay, how do you want me to do that exactly? And we're looking for the exact right way to do it. And like, I was like, whoa. And of course, they were really pointing to the sense of like, when do we lose our wonder and creativity as a child? And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I am creative. And I actually need to create the conditions to experiment a little bit more and see what I'm good at. And then, of course, marrying a creative, I've had way more opportunities to like try new things like playing drums. Who knew? I love it. I am actually pretty decent because I can keep time from dancing.
You are. I've heard it.
Right, okay, I did play drums
You
once.
did,
Yeah, in
publicly.
public.
Yeah, you did.
That was out here in Athens. I did. Yeah, and then I started relating to it differently through other friends, being around osmosis of other creative people. And he would always keep reminding me, no, you are creative. I've sang a song on one of his albums. And so, yeah, it's just creating the conditions again, creating the opportunities to do so.
What about, I like the example of drums. What about playing drums calls to you? What about creativity calls to you?
Ooh, it goes back to that, like, it just is a fresh experience. It just brings us out of the monotony of the day to day. And I think I'm always seeking that like novelty and newness and growth. So I think that all kind of comes through in that. And I also think just the full body experience in that, not realizing. And to be honest, I think it helps me get out some really good, healthy aggression. It's really, I mean, it's just like funny. I loved, if you ever watched The Muppets Animal.
Yes.
He
that
just
makes total sense, Landra.
his like hair all crazy and stuff. But and I mean, God, there's so much more. This is like a whole nother thing. But right, it's like a little girl. It's like, oh, be good, color within the lines. And I was the firstborn child, absolutely was always like, don't want to get in trouble, do all the right things. And drums are primal, And of course, if you're just going in to play in a studio and I'm not in public, I mean, you could just wail away and just go after it. And then if you're playing in public, you are keeping time. And there's something about being in the moment, keeping that time in your body as you're connecting with people around you.
And in the example that I'm thinking of when I've seen you play drums publicly, in that specific situation, you, as much as anyone else on that stage, you were leading where people were going next. It
Oh,
gives you you had such a position of power, and I think for me, knowing you, drums make so much sense that it's something that really taps into you because you're so embodied. You feel things so much in your body. Drums make so much sense that you would be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go ham on these things."
oh my gosh. That I never thought about it that way. You're right, and that's exactly why Alex was like, "I just need somebody to keep time." So, guys, I wasn't doing, like, some crazy, like, riffs and yeah, and so it's just like, yeah, but you're right, it's kinda like it's the baseline, the backbone of everything, and it makes complete sense. I'm always the one, like, creating holding it down for other people.
Yep.
Yeah, I love
Women
that.
hold things.
Mm.
And for you in that moment, you were holding sorry, Alex, you were holding everybody together. It was a great experience for me, though. I was so proud of you because I don't think I would have done that. I kind of grew up in this sort of creative, musically inclined household and had this really sort of creativity fostering childhood. I wouldn't have done that. No, at all. So in that, I was thinking, yeah, wow, she's really something special.
Aw. So what sorts of, creativity are you drawn to? Drawn to. I just realized I said that.
I wish I could draw. Man, do I wish I could draw.
Well,
I
draw as in drawing, yes, but also drawn, like Southern.
drawn. What kind of creativity calls to you? I have gotten into painting. Okay, well, let's just start up, like back up a little bit. My parents gave me my first little point and shoot camera when I was like 5.
Aw.
So photography is definitely one thing. And now I sort of have this odd love-hate relationship photography because I tried to make money off of it in my 20s and I started to hate it. And I don't know, it's just tied up with a very chaotic time in my life. But I do love someone says, "Oh, I need a new headshot." "Oh, I can do that for you." Someone's like, "Oh, I wanna some pictures of, like, my husband and I before our babies." "Oh, I can do that for you." I kind of use it now as just sort of an outlet for friends.
Oh, you're so good at it. You've taken some of my headshots. Thank you.
And I like it. I like being able to sort of preserve this moment for people. And outside of photography as an adult, I've really started I've talked about it before, started to get into painting, I think. Well, I know. But, there's something about it that I really enjoy. It sort of stresses me out to look at a blank canvas and go, "Wow, what am I supposed to do now?" But I'm learning a lot through this process, and it's helping me confront some things that I think I've always known about myself. So, painting is what I love to write. I've been writing since learned to write. But I think I've mentioned this. My dad had this little tiny office in the house that I grew up in, and he had one of the very first sort of Macintosh word processors. And so I would sit there with like one key at a time writing these little stories about cats and dogs, like small word sort of things. So I've always been a storyteller. My parents were in television and in news, documentary filmmakers. I went into the same business. I like to write. I find such catharsis in writing about my life. It's just up until this point, I feel like, what did I really have to say? Who really cares about what I have to say?
Right?
Another thing I'm confronting through creativity.
It goes back to that, right? Yeah, who am I? Yeah. Who are you not to, really, is a question. Mhm, and I love when you talked about the painting, I'm like, "You absolutely are." I went to your apartment not too long ago, and you had canvases and stuff all over, and I was just it was cool because there was, like, different I was like it was interesting to see where I was drawn to, the different color palettes, and then, like, asking you more about this, and there were stories about different emotions that came out that were surprising to you that you were working through, and I just think maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but, like, creativity really can just unlock so much for us and provide so much, I don't know, insights.
I totally agree. And one of the things in reading Big Magic and in reading sort of different works by different creatives, it's this idea that you can't be attached to other people's interpretation of your work. Photography is like a very specific image. And so, in some ways, if I take a photograph of a farmhouse in a green pasture, for the most part, I can see where people will feel a certain way about that. If I paint a picture that's totally abstract because I felt one way in the moment, and then someone says something about, "Oh, wow, it's this, that, or the third," I can't let that upset me because it's their interpretation. So, this idea of sort of trying to let go of the outcome and just working in the moment, just feeling that inspiration, just following where that idea leads is a little I think I'm very spirited, but that's a little too freewheeling for me.
Mm,
And so it's this like I'm learning, project by project to sort of embrace that.
yeah. You got me thinking as well. The other one book that I actually bought in English and brought it with me, like a physical book, because I know I wanted to underline it and everything, is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I've had so many people recommend it to me, people that are, art is what they do for a living. And then other people that they, do artistic things, but hadn't been like their main revenue. And wow, it was really cool. It's 12 weeks. It's self-paced. There's so many questions in there. Again, it's like, what are you learning through creativity? But the thing that I love is that she says, really opens up your eyes to be as you're out in the world looking for inspiration and also to be inspired by taking yourself out on your own dates.
Oh, interesting.
And so that brought me back to realizing I kind of did that when I lived in Argentina. And when I mentioned my story about like loving myself, and I'm like, oh, wow, look at me. I was already doing artistic things.
You were living the artist way before you knew what way it went.
And so again, Elaine, she talks about this. I think this was her journey of she had all these practices. She worked with many different people, and her friends were like, you need to write a book about this. And it's just so great. I mean, it really gets you to kind of unpack like your limiting beliefs, really, because it's so much of really what holds us back. So I recommend that to anybody that's looking for something that, you do kind of at your own pace want to do. I do think at some point thinking about, creating experiences for women, that might be a great thing for all of us to kind of go through together.
Oh, sign me up.
Yeah, I think so.
That's an amazing idea. Okay, stay tuned. We're going to drop the merch and the workshop group at the same time. Creativity, we mentioned at the beginning, it's a very sort of narrowly focused idea culturally. But here we are sort of describing creativity in artistic endeavors.
Yeah, you're right. You're
And
right.
so what other types of creativity potentially are you drawn toward that maybe doesn't that people don't think of top of mind?
Types of creativity that I'm most drawn to. Movement is a big one. I think just expression through any sort of movement, whether it's dance. I've really been into what I led you guys through at our gathering was move what you're feeling. So really, just noticing what you're feeling. And really that's about, for me, letting the mind take the back seat and let the body be in charge, because so often in the mind we're overriding and just moving just for the sake of moving, however that feels. So that's one thing that I'm most drawn to lately. It's also, I feel like so much of this, I'm like the nature podcast, but it is like being outdoors and, actually, no, it's not just nature and the urban environment. Like with my phone, it's like I love that my phone is a camera. And then there's times where I'm like, oh, I should just put the phone away out so much, but I'm capturing really interesting things that I see on the street. Or just anywhere that I am. And it's also the way in which I put stuff together, and how I write about it as well too. Yeah, I find that to be creative and just, you never know what's going to grab your eye or your attention.
You do that so beautifully. And to me, from the outside looking in, I feel like that's a great manifestation of these mindfulness practices that you have inherently in you. This idea that I'm present in my walk home from the farmer's market, but something catches my attention and I want to preserve that moment because it makes me feel something, makes me think something. I think that's a great activity for people to do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And requires creativity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just naturally, I do have a good eye. I know that. And so I've had friends too where I capture something or I'll be out and about and I'll arrange like, okay, wait, stop, hold on, like get over there. Do you mind like lift your chin, look over that way? And I'll, with the lighting. And I've had friends and like we didn't go out to like shoot a portrait and they're just like, that's like the best picture somebody's ever taken of me. And I'm like, oh, yay, how fun,
I like when creativity creeps up on us a little bit. Another creative outlet that I'm thinking of is I have a friend, Lacey. We used to work together. She throws the most incredible parties for her daughters. They are so thoughtful. They are so intentional. They are so focused on creating moments of joy for her daughters and their friends. It's joyful to watch. It's joyful to see her put these things together, and it is such a creative muscle. I don't think I could do what she does. I think I would want to. I know I want to someday, but she has this very special talent for it.
But you'll just hire her.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Invest in her talent.
I'm coming for you, Lacey. I think that's a great example of how creativity can show up in life in a way that is a little bit outside of the norm. And so as you approach creative pursuits in life and prioritize them, is there anything specific that you've noticed through that venture?
That you cannot force it.
Hmm.
That creativity essentially is not like a linear thing. It's not like you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and be creative right now. It's just kind of, I notice it's like when the mood strikes me, just like go down that. And of course, I don't always have the time. So I do notice sometimes something will come up and I'm like, there's an urge there. And so it's just like parking lotting it, writing it down, capturing like what is it at a high level that I just need to get out of my brain and like put it somewhere that I know I can come back to and not lose it. But know that sometimes when it strikes and you do have the time, you just got to drop everything and go for it. And what I've also noticed is like how it positively impacts my mood
Mm-hmm.
and my outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like rejuvenating. It just continues like to, just as much as I'm like putting my energy into it, it's like giving me something back.
That resonates with me so much because I can sort of tell in my body when I haven't had a creative outlet in a while. It's great because for this process, you and I are meeting pretty regularly to talk about ideas and to talk about like what we're going to put on Instagram and how we're going to do the podcasts. So it's a pretty consistent creative outlet. But prior to this, it's like this unsettled feeling that I can't really name that I don't know how to get rid of. And so sort of, as you sit with it, I realized, I just need to like get energy out. And so maybe it's a workout for sure, but it doesn't quite satiate the energy that I need to release. And so for me, I've noticed that as the more creative I am, the more creativity I need to express. And then a big one for me is this idea of perfectionism. And I think when it comes to work product, like perfectionism is good. You don't want misspellings. You don't want any of these things. But when it comes to artistic and creative endeavors, for me, I've noticed perfectionism is such a wall that I have a hard time breaking through sometimes.
Is it like in the getting started or like, because you mentioned looking at the blank canvas?
It can be sometimes getting started. It's like I have this idea for a book. I go to write and I stare at a page and I have so much to say, but I don't know how to start. But too, in painting, sometimes I'll get to a place I really like it, but I know something else is needed, but I like it too much, even though I know it's not complete and I don't know how to go forward because I'm afraid to mess it up. So all of these feelings for me are very tied into the deeper I get into creative practice, the more I have to confront these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Have you found, is this something like you're still active and alive for you? Or have you, okay, I didn't know if you found anything to like work with that. Okay.
I think it will always be. I don't think I'll ever sort of get over this, but I want it to be just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm okay with that. I remember I did a lot of theater when I was younger, a lot of theater. And my first starring role, I was in 10th grade, and I played Rosie Alvarez in Bye Bye Birdie. We did 4 shows, and on the 3rd show, I got so into this one solo. It was like I was in this red satin dress that when I spun the whole skirt, it was just this really like dramatic dance and song number. I got so caught up in my own performance, I totally missed an entire verse. And no one noticed, maybe my mom, because she'd heard me perform it 100,000 times. But I remember I was talking to my uncle as an actor, and he was like, there always have to be 2 people on stage, you performing and you in the wings watching. So you don't get so high on your own performance that you forget and just blank on whatever it is you're performing.
That's interesting feedback, yeah.
And so I think this idea of perfectionism will always be with me, but maybe I can flip it on its head and use it to my own advantage to say, okay, it will never be perfect, but how can I make it as good as I can physically make it? What has creativity taught you, Landra?
Perfectionism, ditto, working with that. And it's really, for me, it's flipping the mindset that, we're just experimenting. Like we're just playing. Like for me, that gets me out of the perfectionism. Because really it is all one big experiment. The pressure, I kind of can diminish it because usually that's what it is, the pressure. And so it's like, this is just for you. And so that really kind of is helpful. Creativity requires rest and inspiration. So like I said before, like if the timing isn't right, just like let it be and do something else and really something completely different, something else that's really just calling your attention. Maybe there's like a to-do list item and that just needs to get like checked off the list so that you feel like you have the capacity. It doesn't have to be go find other inspiration. And I said this earlier, but it's punctuating that it's not linear. It is a process. And sometimes you start something, you walk away from it, you come back to it, fresh eyes. A lot of creative pursuits, it's just not like a one and done. It's many different iterations. What about for you, Callie? What has creativity taught you?
Creativity has taught me to be kinder to myself. I try to hold space for people and give people grace. Creative pursuit has taught me and is teaching me to give that grace to myself. It stems from a place of no one is ever born being perfect at something. And maybe it is all wrapped up in perfectionism, but there is always a process to learn something new. And I think in some ways, if I'm not good at something right away, I probably won't pursue it because I don't like to sit in that sort of uncomfortable phase of, oh, this is not what I wanted to express. This is not how I wanted to create something today. In writing, I can be very precise with my words, and I am very good at using words. I have written my whole life, basically. But in other forms of creative outlet, it's all new to me. And so it's hard for me to divorce from that idea of, well, it's okay. It's kind of what we talked about in an earlier episode. I just don't know how to do this yet.
Exactly, a growth mindset.
So all of that, to me, are lessons that I've learned through creativity. And I think in watching the people I love go through creative pursuit, I've realized that probably more than anything in life, creative activity can grow and change with you. So my dad's been playing guitar since he was 16. Now he's not 16. I won't say how old he is. But he still plays guitar. He still writes songs. My mom is creating this beautiful outlet of painting. And I feel like you need these sorts of activities as you grow and as you age and as life changes. And I think we should prioritize creativity to our best ability in every decade of life.
Oh, such a perfect thought to end today, my friend. That's it for this serving of Biscuits and Sunshine. So many thanks to our team and for those listening to us. We're grateful for each of you. If you're listening to us on Spotify, make sure to fill out the survey question associated with this episode. We love your feedback.
Our hope for you today is this. Whatever way creativity visits you this week, we hope you reach for it with both hands and with a childlike sense of wonder. Welcome it as an old friend. In our next episode, we'll talk about finding and prioritizing moments of rest in our hustle and grind culture.
If you love what we're serving up, be sure to subscribe and rate us on your favorite streaming platform. Also, head over to Instagram and give us a follow at Biscuits and Sunshine, all spelled out. This is Biscuits and Sunshine with Callie and Landra.